Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Faith and Finance Forum, hosted by the Catholic Finance Association and presented by Aquinas Wealth Advisors. We have a great show for you today. Chris Ice is with us. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing great, John. Great to see you this morning.
Very good to see you as well. Let's start with a prayer, shall we?
Absolutely.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now at the hour of our death. Amen. Saint Joseph the Worker, pray for us.
Pray for us.
Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen.
We could even throw in Saint Athanasius too, John. So.
Well, you pronounced it, so thank you. And
if that's the right one, I hope it's his feast day today.
And thank you for Saint A for being a great fighter of the Arian heresy and
Boy,
a very courageous 4th century saint.
Yes, right, absolutely.
And somebody who was born to luxury but gave it up for service to the church. He had all the trappings of a privileged materialistic life early on, and instead he chose the Lord. So a lot of lessons there too. How are you, Chris? It's so good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, you as well. You as well. So trying to make sure I got the screen set up. I was trying to do the up and down. So if I'm looking a little to the side, it's because you're to my left eye. So.
I think you look great, my friend. Well, Chris, you are the founder and president of ICE Executive Coaching and Consulting. Do I have that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Perfect. Tell me a little bit about your firm.
Well, when I stepped down as the president of Ave Maria University, I started to get a lot of calls from different leaders of different organizations asking for help, from the respect of, consulting and some of that. And I started talking to a few folks that were mentors to me, and I asked them some thoughts, and a lot of them said, executive coaching would be a great field to step into, because so many people struggle at the top leadership with who do they depend on when they have a question that they're afraid to ask, if you will. So, it's like, I can't really go to my board with this, and I can't really go to my cabinet with this. So who can I talk to? And it's just, so that's what I've been doing, is lending that resource out. And so it's just been a matter of following up with some networks, and it's been going quite well. So I've really enjoyed the coaching aspect, because it goes back to my early days when I was actually a college baseball coach back at the start of my career. So that's right.
Well, I hear you played a little baseball too, right?
I did. I played college baseball, yes.
And you hold a record in baseball, right?
I do. Yeah.
Tell us about the record you hold.
Well, the NAI career batting average, last I've heard, I don't ever look it up, or usually people just tell me about it, that it still stands. And I hit 480 for my career, so through college. So
480. I mean, that's crazy. That means almost half the time you were at bat, you got a hit, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's hard to believe.
That's insane. I mean, was it a bad era for pitching or something? I mean, that's
it must have been. I think maybe it was just slow pitch softball, and they called it baseball back then. I was playing against 12-year-olds.
Unbelievable, man. I'm impressed. Well done. Yeah. So, Chris, since we're talking about your background, just tell us where you grew up, some things about your family, anything you want to tell us about your early life.
Absolutely. I grew up in Lawrence, Kansas. I was the fourth of 5 children, had 3 older brothers and a younger sister. And so that was, my father was a mail carrier for many years. My mom basically was a stay-at-home mom. And then later, just to supplement some income, she was a part-time secretary for different things, helped with the bus driving or whatever she would do just to make a little extra income. And so anyway, I grew up there. My dad eventually retired from being a mail carrier, and then went to work at University of Kansas as a supervisor of maintenance at Allen Fieldhouse, which is, if you understand athletics, that's like the mecca of college basketball for Kansas fans. So anyway, so that was kind of my upbringing in the town of Lawrence, college town. And when I was, in junior high, I really about 6th grade, I started discerning call to the priesthood. And so by the time I was 8th grade, I made a decision to go to the high school seminary. And I did that at St. Henry's Prep Seminary in Belleville, Illinois, run by the Oblates of Mary Immaculate at the time. So that's kind of a quick version of growing up, but you may have more questions, and I can address those as they come up. So,
was your faith always a big part of your life?
It has. Yeah. I don't know if you've had a chance to got a chance to read my new book that's just out, Walking the Leadership Tightrope. But I talk about, faith um, has always been a part of my life, my Catholic faith. And it was something that really came to me. It was a few years ago. Somebody asked me to tell my life story. And I thought to myself, it's boring. And, so I never really shared a lot about those details because I didn't have that story of, I was in the ghetto, I was homeless, I was a drug addict, I was, all these terrible, things that people, I admire them for coming out of those challenges and then back to their faith or into their faith. And, but I was never one of those. I thought those are the great stories. I didn't have one to tell. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago when I spoke at Tampa Jesuit High School, and I thought I was going to have a 45-minute time frame to speak, and about a week prior, they said you got 13 minutes. It's like, oh, so I had to quickly. I called a person who's helping me with talks at the time, speeches, and I said, "What do I do?" And they said, "Tell me your life in 3 quick steps." I did. I went on stage. I hit it in 13 minutes, and I got a standing ovation from 900 young high school men. And afterwards, they were coming up to me saying, that's my story. I'm just one of those guys that's living my faith, trying to live my faith. And so then I started to realize it does resonate with a certain segment of people. I need to share that story more. So, but yeah, so my grandmother really influenced my life growing up. At 7 years old, I was the only altar server in the town, if you will, or in my parish, it felt like. So she would wake me up every morning, take me to mass. And I was a token altar server. And I had nice rewards. I mean, the little ladies in the pews would slip me $5s and $10 bills. And I think I was one of the richest altar servers in the state of Kansas.
That's great.
I started my entrepreneurial skills there. Afterwards, they'll take me for a donut. And, I was living a life, and it really just really ingrained. Some of you don't realize as a small child when those things are happening, but the grace is flowing. And it really gives you that strength in times you don't even realize until you look back and go, how did I manage that? Well, it was those grace moments in the faith that was instilled in me every day. She had to be there 20 minutes before mass so she could say her rosary. And I'd be setting up for a little Irish priest, Father Moriarty, in our parish for mass. So anyway.
What was it like growing up in Kansas? What are people from Kansas like?
Great down home, Midwestern people that care. They're the kind of people that when you're driving down the road, I think they're just happy to see you, but everybody waves at you when you drive by, flipping their hand, off the steering wheel. It's not like New York where they might flip something else off, right? They're truly waving.
That's great.
I'm giving trouble. New York people are great. I shouldn't say that. But anyway, it's farmers. It's, Lawrence is a little bit different. You have a university town. It's, at the time, I didn't realize that we were in the midst of the throes of the 70s, 60s and 70s, a lot of turmoil. I mean, there was, the hippie movement, the whole sexual revolution going on there in the town. The drugs were rampant. You go an hour west of Lawrence and you're into the farmland till you hit Denver almost. So, totally different people, but that was it. My faith was a very important part of my family. My parents never missed Sunday mass. And of course I was going to daily mass a lot of times most of the time with my grandmother. So.
When you were growing up, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a priest, and also wanted to be a professional baseball player. So I wasn't sure how God was going to work that out. Neither happened ultimately. But
I'm surprised with that 480 batting average, you didn't get more looks from the major leagues. I mean, that's really impressive.
Well, different era. That back then you had to be lucky if a scout showed up to one of your games and it was a good game that you were playing. You could present all the stats you want, but I had a couple of invites to camps, but really it wasn't a great opportunity. And I could have maybe have gone to Florida to, try out with a team. My cousin played for the Royals in the minor leagues and he gave me some advice, and he said, he said, Chris, if you want to go down there, here's how you do it. You're going to make $500 a month if you make it, and you'll be living on a bus and eating at McDonald's. I said, well, that's what I was doing in college, less than 500. So I was in love, and my future spouse was still in college. So I decided to coach college baseball and hang out until she graduated from college. That's what I did. So
okay, very good. And then post college, getting into your mid to late 20s, what professional route did you take at that time?
Well, I started into the college baseball, and then I had I was also working at admissions at the college, and the same area, the Plains College in Dodge City, Kansas. So but then with one of the admissions guys, he's also the head basketball coach, came to me one day and he said, have you ever thought about being in insurance? And I said, no. In fact, my recollection of the insurance guy was a guy wearing, he was smoking a cigarette, sitting at my dad's table. He had a tie that was hitting him with a big belly, hanging out, hitting him about mid-chest, And he's selling my dad a $10,000 life policy. And I said, I don't want to be that guy. And he says, no, I'm talking about commercial insurance. I'm talking about corporations and that type of thing. And I said, oh, maybe that's different. And so I listened, and I met with an individual who was a manager. He was out of Nebraska. He was an alum. And long story short, after a period of 8 interviews, they hired me. And so I started into commercial insurance with a company called Federated Insurance out of Minnesota. They do a lot of small to medium-sized market. And boy, that was the launch to a great career. Really, really enjoyed that career. So, yeah.
Praise God, that's wonderful. What was it like working at Federated? What were the highlights?
Well, there's a lot of, there's a strong Christian atmosphere. I can't say as if it was, predominant, but I felt comfortable with ethics, and those type of things. It was a very ethical, well-run company. They train their people extremely well. And they had a very clear path through management, and where you could actually see it. They didn't hire people in from the outside to go into management. Everybody worked their way up. And so as a very competitive individual, I loved the challenges. And so whenever they presented that, hey, we've got the worst territory in the company, are you up for that? They knew how to spark my intensity as a.
Is that what you did? You led the worst territory in the company?
I took over one of the worst, yep, in Dodge.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, and I took it to. I ended up about 16th out of 500 after a couple of years, and then they promoted me into management. I took over one of the worst districts in the company, and within 5 years, we were the number one or one of the top, and then they transferred me to California to launch a whole new territory out there. There's some face stories behind all these moves. But I went from it was non-existent. They gave me a couple people in California, and we went to number one within 2 years. And then I was promoted to Kentucky, where I was over a 5-state region with 100 million in, premiums and 70 some marketing people. So. Yeah.
You just made some fans in Kentucky, by the way, saying you were promoted to Kentucky, leaving California. That's not something you hear every day, but that's good.
That's right.
I like that, Chris.
Yeah.
So wow. So and that's kind of a theme in your career, right? I mean, you're like the fixer, right? I mean, that's kind of one of your specialties,
yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah. That's been kind of my, not by design. I think, like I said, I have faith in God that. Sometimes I look back and why didn't I just enjoy the fruits of my labor after a while, But it wasn't where God has called me to be. I love watching people grow and improve and get better. I love watching people succeed. And so when I see that, and when I can walk away knowing that I've done something great in that respect, and God gets all the glory for all of that, because all of it, I go, I don't know how that happened. I just hire great people, and then they launch into great careers. And now I'm at the point in my life where those same people that I hired are calling me and saying, man, I'm retired, a millionaire. Thank you so much. I had no idea that I could ever accomplish that when I started, but it was your initial training and hiring and belief in me that launched that career. But that's very satisfying to me and rewarding. So
what a gift. So is that part of your strategy when you do these turnarounds and these fixing projects? Like, for instance, when you turned around the worst branch and made it one of the best, Is the key to that identifying people of high character and capability, training them, guiding them, and watching them run and do great things? Is that basically how you do it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe in empowering people to be very, to succeed at their best level.
Beautiful.
And I have to find what their talents are. So it takes a little bit for, I dig in, what is their interest? What is, I listen a lot. What do they need? What are the resources they need? And then I work from there. If sometimes it doesn't work out, and you have to make decisions about those people as well. But when you go into some organizations, I think it's a little bit different every time, and it's a culture that I work on, and if that culture is toxic, if you will, and I can share more about that later with when I became the CEO of Catholic Charities, you have to really be cognizant of the people that are surrounding you to make sure you're making those good decisions to be able to move and to change the culture, because sometimes it can be very difficult. But when you change the culture, it changes the finances, it changes so many different things. So
is hiring people of high character, high capability, is that the only thing that changes the culture, or are there other steps you take to evolve the culture and improve it?
Well, yeah, there's obviously I'm looking at the finances and all that as well, the revenue streams and what we can do from that, creating a vision for these people to follow and, in a pathway that to be successful, but it also takes a lot of listening. But obviously it starts with people. I firmly believe that. I do not subscribe to a theory of walking into a company and looking in the rearview mirror and cutting things, including people when I walk in. I look at finding the people that want to succeed and want to be on board, and and then getting them in the right seats on the bus, if you will. That's kind of a Stephen Covey theory. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I recognize that Stephen Covey reference. That's interesting. So you were the CEO of a healthcare company too. Tell me about that.
I was chief operating officer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I owned my own hospice company with a partner, and that was a very rewarding experience from the respective. And I'll say experience. It was also a very a bad experience from a financial perspective. I learned how poor Medicare reimbursements are. So anyway, I didn't last long in that one. So I wouldn't call it a financial success, but it was a success in the respect of, learning about end of life issues from a Catholic perspective. And when I walked in, the culture, again, there was a tough culture, and it was during the Terry Schiavo era, if you will, when she and her family were going through that challenging time in Florida. I was running, 2 hospice programs. I was able to integrate our Catholic faith within a hospice that wasn't overtly Catholic. Myself and my partner were Catholic, and we ended up, we were calling ourselves one of the most pro-life hospices in the country, and surely we were. But I would quote out of the catechism about end of life issues, and my staff thought I was a genius, and it was just John Paul II. That's all.
You were quoting a genius, so that's the next.
That's right. I was quoting a genius, but I got the credit many times that it was quite funny. But anyway,
did that take courage to lead the most pro-life hospice in America? I mean,
absolutely. The attacks were heavy, John. You can only imagine, especially from the pro-death side. I remember specifically at a National Hospice Convention in Fort Lauderdale that I attended, and they had the president or CEO of what they called the Oregon Care and Compassion Society, which was basically the death society.
Sure.
And she was advocating for euthanasia. There's probably 500 people within the room that was in this presentation. And I'm looking around, I'm going, I couldn't see anybody seemingly having a real problem with this presentation. And it was unbelievable. She's telling how to kill your patients. I mean, just put it bluntly. So I thought, if I go at this from a moral standpoint or an ethical standpoint, I'm probably going to get, my head handed to me in some respects. So I'm going to go at it from a financial standpoint. And in the hospice world, you're paid on a per diem as a company. Okay, so every day that a patient is in your program, you get paid a dollar amount, whatever that may be. And then out of that dollar amount, you got to figure out all your expenses to pay your people and provide services and all that. So I thought I'm going to attack it from a financial perspective. And I raised my hand And she called on me, and I said, I just have one concern here. I said, if, we're all struggling to make ends meet at times and to pay our people, but I'm curious if that is the case, what you're advocating for, I don't quite understand, because it seems to me like if we kill our patients early, we lose money. Oh boy, she went crazy. She went crazy. And then a lady behind, she said, you're just looking at it for the money. You don't care about patients and taking care of them and all that. And the lady behind me stood up and supported me and said, no, I think that's important to know. We've got all these other challenges, but you're advocating for death, and that's not, we should be helping them live as long as they can live. And later to find out, she called the end of the meeting right there and would not answer the question. And behind me, I found out later it was a nun from Oregon that had been fighting this gal for quite a few years. So I didn't recognize her because she didn't have a veil or habit on, but she came up and identified herself. So we tag teamed together later. But yeah, but it's rampant. But it was very rewarding to be able to share with staff about navigating through, the Terry Chavo family's issues and putting that in, said, this is how it is. This is how we, nutrition and hydration is just it's okay. It's normal. It's not going to prolong their life to feed them. We have to feed our patients. The natural death process will take place. And so it was a great learning experience, and great from a faith perspective as well.
Chris, and I've heard this from other people that know you well. I mean, this isn't the only time where you stood up for what was morally right in an environment where it was difficult to do so. Where do you find that courage? Because some people, want to do the right thing. They want to stand up for what's right. But, not only is it just, challenging basically to do that, there's a lot of reasons that you can justify not doing that. For instance, I have a family to feed. My professional reputation is all I have. I can't lose this job. I can't disappoint my boss or my investor or my client, or, there's 1,000 excuses, why, basically I'm not going to do what's right. In more than a few times in your life, even when things were on the line, you chose to speak up for what was right. Where do you find that clarity and that courage to do that?
Well, I think like you can go right back to, the faith I have, and I figure that if something happens to me, God will still take care of me. And my experience has come about, he always has. And so anytime I walk down that road, I'm not an overtly confrontational person. I try to, I ask tough questions. I won't back off if it's, like you said, the morals and the ethics of things, especially if it's the right thing. If it's debatable, I mean, we can have a discussion. I don't have an issue with that. But nonetheless, I think it's that fiber in me and my faith, knowing, and sometimes a little scary to trust, okay, I may have my head chopped off here, but I think it needs to be said. And it happens on occasion, but God has always 100% faithfully taken care of me when I've spoken up in truth. And sometimes I'm going, why did I do that? Why did I do that? But the walk is amazing, but it strengthens you more when you make those calls, those decisions.
And would you say when you start, doing that, when you start standing on your principles and making courageous calls, even when, there's a price to be paid for it, would you say that the next time you do it, the time after that becomes a little easier?
It can. Yeah. I don't know if it ever really gets easier.
Well,
and again, there are times, I will say, that, if you got a lot of mouths to feed and you're trying to make that call, I was always in a good financial situation where I didn't, I subscribe to the theory of not being in debt. And so I've always tried to stay out of a lot of debt. I have some debt, but it's not, which allows that flexibility. But if you don't have that flexibility, it's sometimes I would say people have to, for the sake of their family, maybe swallow their concern in public but they could still express what it is. And I encourage people in those situations. Sometimes you have to walk away from the organization, and you may have to do it quietly, but if it's conflicting with your morals and your ethics and your principles, there are other companies out there that will support you.
Keen insights, Chris. Really, really well said. Let's talk about your time as CEO of Catholic Charities in Kansas City. That was a real highlight of your career. You did some great work there. Tell us about that position and what it was like.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I walked into an organization that when you think about Catholic Charities, it's you think it would be Catholic. and I can say this because my bishop was very supportive. Bishop Johnston, James Johnson out of Kansas City, just an awesome bishop. Just talked to him the other day. Again, we stay in close touch, but he said, Chris, I need you to help me with bringing the Catholic identity back in. I think it's lacking in Catholic Charities here in Kansas City. And so when I went in, I started I had about 75 employees or so. And when I walked in, I just started interviewing. I talked to every employee one-on-one. I wanted to hear right down to the receptionist. I wanted to find out what was going on. And after about 3 months, I figured out that I didn't ask the question if you were Catholic or not Catholic. But I found out I probably had about 8 employees that were Catholic is all. And
how many was the grand total?
About 75.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I ended up, I was talking to a major donor, and he became a major donor, let me put it that way. But at the time he wasn't. I asked him why he wasn't giving. And he said, well, there's 2 things why I'm not giving to your organization. Number one, you're not Catholic and you're not charitable. And I thought, whoa, we have some work to do. So long story short, I just systematically started working toward bringing in the right people. And anytime there was an opening, I was interviewing everybody that walked through the door. And I'll give you a real simple tip. What I did, I had our mission and our vision laid on a piece of paper. It was typed out, and there's simple quotes. Okay. And I'd lay it in front of every person that came in to interview. And I asked them to read it. And then I asked them if they had any concern or problem with it. And it talked about, we were Catholic. We subscribed to the bishop. He was our sole member of our organization. We were going to uphold the Catholic teachings, Jesus Christ, And no kidding, John, I would have people say, well, I'm atheist. Really? And I'm like, this is probably the 6th interview, and they're getting to me at this point. I'm okay. Well, do you have a problem with the mission? Well, yeah, I would have a problem with that part. Okay. And so I just went to the point, we have to hire for mission. They might have the skills and all that. And so just on and on. And either many people I rejected. My staff initially was upset because we got to fill these positions. We're overwhelmed. But eventually that culture started changing with the right people. And they didn't have to be Catholic, but they did have to submit to, what we were trying to do. And when I left there almost 3 years later, we had approximately, probably well over half were Catholic in the organization. And I can tell you 75% of them were very strong Christians. So.
Yeah, it's very interesting that I want to drill down on this just for a second because, it can be tempting as an executive, who's trying to change the culture and especially trying to reinforce the Catholic identity to, have a bias rise where you're like, I'm just going to hire Catholics and that's going to do it. That it doesn't necessarily work that way, right?
That's correct.
And then simultaneously, you don't want to disqualify somebody who may be a good mission fit, who's not necessarily Catholic, just because of that. They may have a Christian perspective, like you were saying, that is compatible with working at Catholic Charities. So there's a little bit of tension there, right? I guess that's you're walking the tightrope to borrow one of your other themes. Yeah.
But John, we as Catholics should be evangelizing anyway.
Amen. Yeah.
And so I encourage. I had one, no kidding, at Catholic Charities. I had a woman that had her own church. And she would come in and eat lunch with me, and we would discuss the Bible during our lunch hour. She'd eat and I'd eat, and we'd pull out Bible verses, and we had a great respect for each other's faith. She was one of our great employees that was a leader. of leading, because the people coming to our door, 98% of them weren't Catholic.
Yeah.
They were the lost and forsaken. I mean, these are the homeless women have never probably heard of Christ. They were prisoners dropped off at their door coming out of prison with nothing,
Mm.
and a couple of bucks in their pocket, and a change of clothes. And so if we, I said, we need to find Christ in every person that comes through our door. And so, but as a Catholic, we need to evangelize in that respect. And so I hired a nun to be at my front door. She was a Franciscan nun in full habit. She would greet every client that came in the door, a potential client, and she would ask him to pray. That was her job. She was a greeter. And I put a chapel in the office right behind the front desk. It was Our Lady Undoer of Knots Chapel. And she would invite people in to pray. Every client that came in, she would invite him to pray. And that was the first thing we did. And that's how we started our evangelization efforts. And then all the employees started feeling free to pray at the beginning of meetings and all those type of things as well. So
that is fascinating. And I think it illuminates what's probably another one of your leadership habits is spending that personal time with people. Like you mentioned, the woman with their own church, you guys would have lunch and talk about the Bible together. Is that something you do intentionally? You try to get that personal quality time with your team?
I do, absolutely, yes. And when you're leading a large organization, it's harder to do. And so, many times I would do listening sessions to where I would bring in, 10 to 12 people. I usually try to keep it on a smaller scale. And then I would just literally sit with the empty notepad and take notes. And I'd say, tell me what's going on. What can we do? There's no other executives in the room. Tell me what we can improve on. What can we do? And it wasn't a gripe session. I wouldn't allow that. I said, I want improvement things we can work on. And I wouldn't allow complaints about their boss. It was an open discussion. And then sometimes I'd have to maybe ask a few questions just to lead them in, but those helped as well. So, and then if somebody wanted to talk one-on-one, I would have them obviously set up a time, and my door was open the vast majority of the time. So.
Wow. So aside from this cultural transformation and bringing in more Catholics, or at least Catholic compatible people, people that are aligned to the mission, what were the practical challenges you faced as CEO of Catholic Charities in Kansas City?
Well, we had 10 years of deficits running consecutively when I walked in the door, and the previous year was, I think it was about I'd have to go back and look at the 990, but I think it was 800,000 loss or deficit. And if the difference probably, John, as a finance guy, between nonprofit and for-profit. You call it a deficit in one, the other it's a you had a net loss, right?
Just a nice way to say it.
But anyway, so I was tasked. We owned a large building in downtown Kansas City, and I thought to myself, well, this is our office. We're not using anything but office, and we're sitting on this huge asset with $4.5 million, of debt, and I could sell it and basically roll our way out of this deficit quickly, for that purpose, and then go lease. And I really don't believe in nonprofits owning a large building where they have to take on debt. I don't think it's wise from that perspective. If you own it outright, sure, that's great. Or somebody can pay for it, cover it. But having a high debt load on a nonprofit when you can be giving that money to the services you're providing is a lot better source, in my belief. So anyway, that's what I did, and we moved to a smaller space that accommodated, more even our better needs in that respect. And then we were down in the heart of the community where we needed to be serving, and it was very effective. And so from there, within a period of 2 years, I entered into some other negotiations with donors. Donations changed dramatically. I was told we will never be able to raise money from non-Catholics because I'm changing the Catholic identity, because I rebranded the organization. As I told you, I put a chapel in. I put crucifixes up. There's only 3 crucifixes in my office when I first got there. I put crucifixes in every room. I put quotes from all the great saints. I renamed all the meeting and conference rooms after saints, all related to charitable work. Mother Teresa's statue stood right at their front door. Divine Mercy, I put all these things up. And but long story short, our donations, I found out from these quote non-Catholics, were less than 5% of our total revenue. And so but the people that were Catholic started giving in great numbers. And within a few years, I also entered into, we had a lot of HUD housing, and I was overseeing 8 different housing complexes for approximately about 500 residents. And I was able to sell or enter into some selling negotiations with those to be able to bring the profit back to Catholic Charities. And when I walked away, we had about 17 million in the bank. So that was, and now they're just doing awesome things with that service. So the idea was we put that into a trust to where now it just basically funds the operations of the organization. So
what an amazing story. Wow. And, just aside from that, turnaround example, which is so impressive, would you just comment on it, I guess, like, the centrality and the significance of a Catholic Charities organization in a big city? I mean, like, how, in terms of, like, I guess, market share impact, however you want to, describe it, how important was it to the people of Kansas City to have a thriving Catholic Charities organization, to the poor, to the homeless, to the marginalized? I mean, would you just comment on, what that meant to the people?
Yeah, well, there is a lady that we took in. This is a great example. Her name was Judy, and I think I reference her in my book. I should know that. But anyway, Judy's coming out with her own story. But Judy was in prison for 36 years for a murder she didn't commit. And I met her daughter, who was running a home for pregnant women, or young ladies. And she would take these women in and until they gave birth to their child. But she could only take care of them up to a period of about 6 months or a year. I can't remember what it was. So I reached out to her to say, we have programs to help these same women move into, to where they can get them to their child to they're 5 years old. Plus, we also have an adoption service that if they choose to give their baby up for adoption, we can help her with that. So I was meeting with her daughter, and I didn't know about her mom at the time. But anyway, so as we were chatting, she told me about her mom just got out of prison. And she was, the governor had pardoned her, and I can't remember what they call it, where it was a complete pardon, and I'm drawing a blank. There's basically her offense. She was found innocent and released. But guess what? 36 years in a prison. They don't give her a job. They don't give her anything. So I asked her, can your mother come speak to us? And because I saw her on TV, she was a very joyful person. I'd like her to speak to my staff about her needs and what she wants. So she comes in, and this woman, Judy, had everybody in tears. Because one of the questions they asked, I said, Judy, aren't you mad? Aren't you angry? 36 years in prison for a murder you didn't commit. Your boyfriend committed it. He walked and you got convicted. And she said, I was mad initially. And after about 3 years in the prison, I thought to myself, I can either be bitter or I can be better. And I chose to be better. So I started Bible studies for women. I started working with women who are incarcerated and bringing women to Christ and all this. And I was kind of blown away. So afterwards, I asked Judy, I brought her in my office, said, Judy, how can we help you? And she goes, I need a job. And then she held up her phone. She goes, and I don't know how to use this thing either. She went into prison in 1982. She gets out in 2019.
Yeah, as I said, being in for 36 years, there'd be a lot of technological advancements you missed.
Yeah,
wow,
she
crazy.
had no idea. So long story short, I gave her a job as her secretary and a receptionist right up front. We taught her how to use the phones, and she's still there today. She's the most joyful receptionist you can imagine. But again, just incorporated our mission, who we were, what we wanted to do. And oh my gosh, there's going to be a documentary coming out, something. I keep telling Judy, write your book. Because the governor is a good friend of hers, Governor Greitens, in Missouri at the time. So, but
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. Incredible. And we could probably talk about that era in your career all day. There's a lot of good stuff there. But let's move along to your presidency of Ave Maria University.
Sure. Yeah, that was on I guess I could bridge over to my personal side a little bit. I know we're talking career, but Ave Maria, I had things are going well at Catholic Charities, and I had no intention of leaving or even considering leaving. I loved what I was doing. And we were making great progress. And I grew up in the Kansas City area, so that was, I was kind of back home. My family was doing well, but my wife had come in to her second bout of cancer, and so this was, and I get a call from 3 different people, independent of each other, asking me to apply to the job at Ave Maria. The first 2, I said, I'm not interested. I've never run a university. I'm really happy what I'm doing right now, but I'll pray about it. And so after the 3rd call, I said, okay, maybe the Lord's trying to tell me something. So I thought, okay, it's Ave Maria University. I'm gonna turn this over to the Blessed Mother. And so I put my resume in on the July 16th, which is the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And I started the novena, the 30-day novena to the Blessed Mother. I thought to myself, okay, it's in your hands. So John, I didn't make a phone call. I didn't network. I just decided I'm just going to allow God to work. So I did. I let it be. On about the Feast of the Assumption, I get a call. Actually, I think it's the Feast of the, what comes on the 22nd of August? I'm trying to remember. It's not the Assumption's the 15th, 22nd is the coronation. And I get a call, and it's from Ave Maria and the search firm. And they said, you're one of our, finalists. We'd like to talk to you a little more. So I said, okay. So I did. And again, I lent it. I didn't really, I wasn't enthusiastic. I was just being a part of the process and really trusting. Kept doing my job. I was also planning a pilgrimage to Rome and Italy with my bishop. We had, a lot of pilgrims ready to go. My wife is still finishing up her chemo. She goes, I don't know how we could ever make this move. And I said, I don't either, hon. I really don't. September 8th, I get another call. Our Lady's birthday. And it's from Ave Maria again. And so we want to bring you in for a live interview with the search team. And so I said, well, here's my dilemma. My wife just finished up her chemo. I'm getting ready to go on a pilgrimage. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to make that. And long story short, they rearranged the times to accommodate me to come interview in person. I did. And I walked out. I did not think it was a great interview. I walked out. I jumped on a plane to Italy with the pilgrims, literally within a day. I landed on the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. I get a call from the head of the search committee and said, we want to talk to you more about becoming the president of Ave Maria University. And when can we talk? And that's how it all evolved. And then from there, I accepted the job, and in November, was really excited about everything. And then 2 weeks later, we found a brain tumor on her brain. I was prepared to resign or to step away from the position. And the doctors assured us that everything was fine, that I could move forward. She just needed a couple, 3 radiation treatments and we would be fine. So I moved forward with the job. I took the job on January 1st. Inherited in February a global pandemic called COVID, January 20. So we packed up the family and moved in from Kansas City. Since school was out, everything's shut down, everybody's going virtual. I did keep the campus open at Ave Maria. I allowed students to leave if they wanted. We did a hybrid. By the beginning into April, we had about 200 students still on campus. We were still teaching in the classrooms, and got the family moved on Easter Sunday. We landed in Ave Maria. My wife wasn't feeling well. I took her into the doctor a couple of days later, And within 2 weeks, she passed away. And you got to have faith at that moment. And she died on the feast of, in the vigil of St. Joseph the Worker. So anyway, sorry, John. But
So,
yeah, thank you. It's
6
been 3
months.
years. It's hard to, yeah. Anyway,
No, take
so anyway, so that was a, you know, it's amazing. I haven't cried about that for a while. So those emotions come back at times. But, you know, so here I was leading the university, walking, you know, in faith, walking that leadership tightrope. You know, I got all these things going on. And now I got 4 kids still at home that, you know, they're living in boxes. She never unpacked a box. And so anyway, it was the community, the students, the faculty, the staff. They were awesome. And they rallied around my family. They were bringing meals every day, you know, the support. I couldn't have been in a better spot at that moment. So anyway, it was extremely a gift of grace to me and my family during that time. So, but after a year, you know, you know, the way God works, you get the right people, and the right people run and they operate and they do great things. And so we had, you know, we ended up with record fundraising, the highest university ever had in their history. We had the previous year, they had less than 9 million in fundraising. We ended up at 22.5 million in the next fiscal year.
Well done.
Yeah, we had record enrollment, 501 new students enrolled. But it came to the finish line at the end of the fiscal year of 21. And ultimately, I saw my girls suffering, and God gave me an opportunity to step away. And I say that, you know, at the time, wasn't always clear. When I look back, perfect timing on God's part. And I was where I was supposed to be. What I always preached, family comes first. And that gave me that opportunity. And now I can see clearly how the beauty of that whole thing, you know, where God allowed that. My daughters are doing fantastic at this point. I still have 2 at home. So anyway.
So less than 6 months, you leave your hometown and a job that you were thriving at and doing great work, important work, meaningful work for the poor, aligned with your faith. You leave your hometown, you move to Southwest Florida, you take on an incredibly challenging position. You get hit with the COVID stuff. Your wife takes a turn for the worse and ultimately passes away, all in less than 6 months.
That's right, 4 months, actually.
less than 4 months. How did you survive all that?
Well, honestly, people are asking me that question a lot, which is why I ended up writing my book. You know, so it's like, because I kept saying, I don't know. And then as I stopped, eventually to reflect, you know, it was the daily rosary. It was the adoration chapel. I'd frequent the adoration chapel. I believed as a leader, when, you know, I see the students at Ave Maria, you know, covering adoration chapel perpetually 24/7, and some in the local community joined in as well. But I said, I got to lead this effort, and if I'm going to lead it, I'm going to take the 3 a.m. hour on Friday morning, which I like the 3 a.m. hour anyway. And I did. And it was, you know, so it was those grace moments, going to mass every day. I look back, it was my faith. It was everything that I learned from when I was 7 years old, bringing it forward. And when that, you know, those times of trials hit, you know, God walks you through that. And so now it's, you know, the old footprints in the sand, you know, poem where they talk about, you know, well, there's only one set of footprints. Lord, where were you in those troubled times? And they said, well, I was carrying you. Those are my footprints, you know. And that's truly what it was. And it was everybody, just, you know, the amazing people, you know, all throughout. But ultimately, my faith is what sustained me through all of it. It was cloudy at times, believe me, but my vision was clear. I knew where I needed to go, was to keep walking, moving forward, not to stop, to give people hope, to give people, you know, that you know, death isn't the end. My wife I made sure she had the apostolic pardon. You know, I advocated for that. in the hospital where nobody was allowed.
Hmm.
And I got a priest in there, my doctor sneaking in the Blessed Sacrament underneath his coat to bring her Holy Communion, but a priest was there within 10 minutes of her death, my chaplain. The churches were locked down. We were only allowed 10 people to congregate, and they told me I couldn't have a funeral for my wife. I said, wait, the church in Ave Maria holds 800 people. What are you talking about? I have 11 in my family. Am I supposed to sit outside? Of course, obviously the bishop was supportive. You just go in quietly. Let's get this done. But it was that time. It was a terrible time. But in the darkness, there's light. And, the light shines the brightest in the darkest of times. And that's what I felt. So
clearly, and even on the practical level, again, you led Ave Maria University to success as president. Both in fundraising and enrollment. And today, Ave Maria University is thriving. It's experiencing a real golden age, really, by every measure, coming out of, the COVID moment that you so ably guided it through. So really remarkable. Now you're the CEO and founder of ICE Executive Coaching and Consulting. I know that executive coaching and working with business leaders is really your heart. I mean, you love doing that. And you have this exciting new book, Walking the Leadership Tightrope. Tell us all about your book. Why did you write it? What are its main themes? Why should our listeners go and buy it today?
Well, the fact is, it's not a theoretical book. So if you're wanting deep theory for a classroom, it may not be the one you want to gravitate toward. But if you want one with theory and experience to back it, it's a great book for the classroom. And that's what it is. So I bring my own practical advice with experience. When I was an adjunct at Franciscan University, I would bring the theory, but then I would lend it with a lot of stories and theory, my life and experiences. And the students love that. And that's what I have in this book. So it's my life story, and there's not a deep faith element in this book. I tried to keep it a little level higher than that. But when I give talks to Catholic organizations and that, I dive deep into the novenas and the rosaries and, my daily mass walk and all that. So that's a big part of the underlying story is the faith. It's well documented throughout, but it's my life story with my career and showing how you don't have to shelve your faith. And especially in times of chaos and crisis, when it comes, your faith is what you're going to have to rely on to be able to survive. And that's what it's about. So,
wow, I love that. And it's available wherever books are sold. Or...
It's on Amazon. Yeah, it's on Amazon now. The hardbacks, I'm still waiting on. It's the printer's a little slower on the hardback editions, I'm finding, but that'll be out soon. And then, but right now, the paperback and the Kindle versions are out on Amazon. So
wonderful. And talk to us about your executive coaching practice. What type of executives are seeking you out for coaching? Will you tell us a little bit of just any anecdotes you feel comfortable sharing about that practice?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I initially kept it open. I figured I would be open to anyone, but a lot of Catholics and Christian leaders are contacting me, and it's that faith journey, and so that's perfect. That's a great segment. That's my that's my element, if you will. But I want to help them, and I mentioned this at the beginning, that many times they don't have a sounding board when things are maybe not even challenging. They just don't know who to ask. You don't want to go to your HR person if that's the person you want to terminate. I mean, that's a difficult situation to be in. So who can you call on? Well, there's, I'm a resource for that. There's also, challenges with culture. Chris, how did you do the culture thing? So one of my clients is a Catholic Charities, and I'm working with their whole cabinet, their whole team, and we're bringing in things to understand their different work styles and personalities and all those type of things to be able to understand each other from a biblical perspective. I'm using that. And so we those types of things I'm bringing in. Some of them are just, they're, a lot of finance people who are running organizations are introverts, and they don't like to give talks or speeches, and it's difficult for them. So I help them with that part of it. Just, coming out of your to be an introvert, you have to be able to share that vision and the great person that you are. And sometimes sharing those personal stories, people will resonate. And I've seen introverts just going, whoa, I've never gotten a standing ovation before. That was awesome, little things like that. So there's some of that element of coaching that goes on, just to give them that confidence to go forward and to be a great leader and to not be afraid to share your faith in this world of what we think we can't do. And we can. We need more of them to be able to step up, because the other side's very loud and they're going to shout you down, and they're a minority. People in the back, you stand up and fight.
Well said. And I would especially think that your services would be helpful to somebody who's going through a heavy turnaround, or a startup, or somebody who's just trying to fix a big problem in his or her business, because you've done that. I mean, that's your story, that's your background. Just taking situations that appear hopeless and turning them around and doing something great with them. So I mean, you passing along those anecdotes and giving them coaching and encouragement in those moments, I'm sure it is very valuable to them, but also probably great for you too to pass that along.
It is. It's very rewarding. Like I said, I love to see people succeed. That's a great. I get more value out of that than any money I've ever made, is just watching others succeed. And I right now I'm also working with this new Catholic medical school that's going to be on the campus of Benedictine College in Atchison, and working with that team, just in an advisory role. It's right now it's a pro bono until they get up and launched at this point, but they've been just putting that together from just a simple concept of being a pro-life medical school. We're not going to teach gender reassignment therapy. We're not going to teach about abortions. We're going to have a high component of bioethics within this new medical school, osteopathic school. These leaders are wonderful. Dr. George Mishu, if you haven't interviewed him, maybe that's your next one you should have on. He's fantastic. And the guy gets finance. He gets, the Catholic faith. He gets, the medical school perspective. He started 7 osteopathic schools. And I'm just sitting back in amazement going, I don't feel qualified. But it's the faith element that's bringing us together in this team. They're going to do great things. I can see it. There's a lot of great things coming together. So.
And on the consulting side, separate from the executive coaching, what type of client do you work with on the consulting side?
Yeah, that was one. That's one.
That's one example. Okay.
That is one example. Yes, Catholic Charities would be another one. I've also worked with another Chesterton Schools network. They're expanding globally, and Dale Alquist and his team is just doing a beautiful. I think they're up to 50 some schools now. Across the globe, and their goals are to hit 130 by 2030. Emily de Rothstein's doing great things. So again, I'm just helping them. I was helping them with some fundraising concepts and things to put together, and they're continuing to grow and to launch in that. So it's gravitated towards Catholic education in some respects. Some of my experience, and those are some of them I've been working with. So. Yeah.
Is this how you want to spend the rest of your career, giving back in this way through executive coaching and consulting? Is this kind of your thing for now, you think?
I'm open to it. Yeah. I mean, I'm open to anything. So if I figured, right now I'm in a position where the executive coaching gives me flexibility to raise my 2 youngest daughters, who are 14 and almost 18 now.
Yeah.
And, I need to get them through high school. So any kind of move would be a challenge for me, where this allows me that flexibility. I can travel and get around out of Orlando is real quick and easy. But if, a great opportunity came up where I was working remotely with something else, I'd be open to that too. But I do love the coaching aspect, and I enjoy having a little bit of that independence of being an entrepreneur as well.
It's cool. It's exciting.
It is. Yeah. Cool. It is.
Hey, Chris, what advice would you give somebody that has recently gone through, or is maybe just going through it right now today, listening to this program? A business person who just feels like they're at the bottom. You know what I mean? It's just not clicking. They're just feeling like they're just getting, the crap beaten out of them, and just nothing's working, nothing's clicking. Because you've been in those situations personally, and you've helped other people get through those situations. Yeah. What advice would you give them to get through that challenge?
Get on your knees. Pull out the rosary, go to the adoration chapel, go to mass more frequently. The sacraments are what will give you the strength, number one, to have a clear decision, go to confession, clear the slate on your soul, to be able to see and to hear clearly what God's calling, and then also just say, Lord, one thing you realize as a human, or you should, is that we're not God, and He can do great things. And I get so frustrated at times when I hear people say, but Chris, I don't see this plan working. And I say, well, we started with prayer first. When you start with prayer and lead with prayer, the strategy and the vision will evolve and it will come together. I guarantee it. It happens all the time. But so many people get caught up in, well, they're faced over here, and then we'll have my corporate business skills over here. No, it's got to be integrated. And if it's not integrated, there's failure inevitably is going to happen. And when you do it, you'll see unbelievable things that happen and grow. And when people just turn it over, even in the darkest of times, and say, Lord, it's yours. Lay it at the feet of the cross. Lay it at the feet of the Blessed Sacrament when you're sitting there in adoration, and say, Lord, take it. I can't do it. It's yours. And He will give you that insight and that grace, to be able to come up with those great ideas. And I'll tell you what, I got, a great role model. He was my confirmation saint. That's St. Joseph. That guy walked to Egypt with the Holy Family on faith, on a dream. And I think Mother Angelica said it well when she said something of, people talk about St. Joseph being really old and as an old father. And she goes, old guys don't walk to Egypt, He had to be young and ambitious. And he was an entrepreneur. He was a carpenter. And he left it all on faith to go to Egypt. And there, obviously, he thrived and was able to come back. And he taught Christ all those skills. And so anyway, he had
no words in the gospel either, all action.
Yeah. Had to, he had to raise two perfect people. That's not easy to do.
Chris Ice, listen, brother, as we wrap up our time, let us know how our listeners can access you, whether that's on social media or the internet or whatever, and remind us the name of your book and where to get it one last time, please.
Okay, very good. Yeah, iceexecutivecoaching.com. That's my website. You can go there, and that'll give all the contact information, as well as the book is called Walking the Leadership Tightrope: How to Balance Career and Family Through the Chaos of Crisis. And you can find that on Amazon. And if you have any other questions, you can always reach me directly on email at cmice9@gmail.com, cmice9@gmail.com. So,
Chris, thank you. Great interview, great conversation. Godspeed to you. Wishing you continued success and your family all the best.
You're doing great things, and I appreciate that. I listened to a couple of your podcasts and before I came on, and you're doing great work. Keep that up, because we got to get the message out. Our faith is so important, and we got to stick together in these some of these seemingly dark and challenging times. So
thank you for those kind words, Chris. This has been the Faith and Finance Forum, hosted by the Catholic Finance Association and presented by Aquinas Wealth Advisors. We'll see you next time, folks. God bless.